Welcome back to this episode of the Law of Relevancy podcast. Today we have Michael Cooney. He is the co-founder of WhatConverts, which consequently is one of the longest software partners, if not the longest software partner that our agency has had. And it's been invaluable working with them over the years. And it's my pleasure to welcome Michael to the show. Thank you, Michael, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Cords. It's been amazing to see that you've been with us basically from the beginning and you're still with us. And we've been around over 9 years now.
And I was, customer 164 or something?
Yeah, that's it. In the database, you're like, I think it was 192.
192. How many customers do you have now?
So we have customers and then websites we serve. So we serve about 20,000 companies, in their websites, but actual customers, which many of them are agencies, we're about 2,700.
Wow. That's a lot of growth over 9 years. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been hard work, but it's been rewarding.
Yeah. Well, as watching, obviously I've had a close relationship with your product over the years. And one of the things that I have a heart for is product development. Being an agency owner, a professional service company, there's this conundrum of it's a lot of fun. You get to solve all these problems, and it's always exciting. But the problem is you're not creating in the true sense of the way that valuation of companies or anything understands it, of recurring monthly revenue from long-term contracts and things like that. And one of the things that is very good at that are SaaS products, which is what you've created, right?
Yes.
And so it is quite interesting. And so I've always been very interested in product development and keep telling myself one of these days I'm going to make something.
Mm-hmm. I mean, product development, it's like a two-edged sword. And the interesting thing is, I think agencies are a great incubator for product development. In an agency, the beautiful thing about it is you get to work with companies, you get to solve problems, and you get to see similar problems that occur with multiple, companies or clients. And then once you see a recurring pattern happening, you can build a product, to solve that. So I think agencies are a wonderful starting point for people looking to, get into their own business or, I don't know, many different paths. But I went myself from an agency path into a product development path, and it's been very rewarding.
Yeah, I remember when I came across your product around 9 years ago, I was looking for something. I was actually trying to write my own JavaScript that would swap out numbers on a website based off of which marketing source they came in on. And back in the day, we now call that dynamic number insertion, but back in the day, I just was swapping numbers based off of, request headers and host headers and response headers of HTML pages. And I was just so pleasantly surprised to come across your product, and I was like, man, this is perfect. And I remember speaking to your co-founder because he was handling tech support at the time, and I was like, hey, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? It's like, I'm so glad I found you guys because I don't have to make the tool myself.
Yeah. No, that's amazing that you found that. So, I mean, the start of WhatConverts so call tracking ended up being the main product that we came to market with. But we actually started with proving marketing, like proving that your marketing is worth it. And it comes from, we had clients and we'd go into meetings, and most of the time it's good, but when we're running a campaign and we're getting great results, and I remember the one meeting, I walked into the client's office and I said, hey, the campaign we're doing, we doubled leads this past month. Isn't that great? And before I went in, I was going to use that to then as a stepping stone to motivate additional budget. And he's turned around and he said, like, when I asked, isn't that great? He said, well, I don't know. And I mean, like, what do you mean you don't know? We like doubled leads and these leads are good. He says, well, how many of those leads are existing customers? And I was like, yeah, that's a difficult thing as a marketer to answer. And he says, like, yeah, I just don't know. I mean, it just seems like a lot of existing customers asking for quotes. And I couldn't answer that. And it was just another example of many times where, as a marketer, I didn't have all the data I needed to answer questions. And so that was like the final straw for us to create WhatConverts, which would basically be a data resource to collect all the marketing data, including call tracking, and then to be able to show the customers and then answer questions when they're asked. So that same question now, if you asked it to me today, I could use WhatConverts to answer it very confidently.
Yeah, and it's funny because in the marketing and advertising world, there's your side of the spectrum, which is based off of radical transparency, where you're trying to track the entire life cycle of a lead as it goes through and converts and may show
Mm-hmm.
up on other channels before it converts finally on one of them. And then you've got
Mm-hmm.
the other side, which is the more traditional side, where they'll come in and they'll say, wow, leads are up, and it's radio or it's some sort of a mass marketing. And they love the ambiguity. They love the fact that you
Yes.
can't track it very well. And they use that as a strength, you know?
Yeah, those are the agencies you want to avoid. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's true, there's smoke and mirrors, but I mean, I've always, as a marketer, I find that many agencies are undervalued for the value they bring.
Yeah.
And there are a few bad characters, but we've really built for the full transparency. We want agencies not only to prove that they're doing what they set out to do, but we want them to prove the value of what they're doing. And I mean, I tell one story. I had a client in the day. It started in 2003. I built him a website, and he was actually on the sales side. So all leads from the website came through this salesperson. And we were charging them about $5,000 a month to set up their website and to search engine optimize it. And based on an hourly rate, it was a good rate in those days. Um, Little did I know that, so $5,000 a month is $60,000 a year for our agency, and we were happy with that. But to find out that the sales commission he made on the sales was $500,000. And all he was doing is putting himself between the leads and the sale. And the actual sales amount being generated was $6 million. So when I realized that over time, I realized, gee, we created a lot more value than we got paid, even though we were happy getting paid what we were getting paid. If you understand the value that you're generating, it just changes the picture and where you can go. Because if I'd known early on that that was happening, we could have accelerated it a lot more as well and offered even more value. So it's just an interesting thing in terms of value and what you build. And when you're saying full transparency, it works both ways, but I think that the marketers that are doing it right, we just want to elevate them.
Well, it is interesting because the story you just mentioned is one of those shiny objects that is super enticing to me, and I have a habit of getting distracted and being like, "Oh my God, I could go over here. Maybe I'll start a business being a broker for that type of lead." But you stayed super focused with your product development. I'm sure there's a lot of things that come your way. There are new CRMs that pop up all the time, new project management software. There's lots of places where your tool could fit in somehow, and it's just a small little leap to go over here, but you chose to stay very focused with your product development. And I think, honestly, that's one of the reasons why it's so good, because you've really gone a mile deep with what's possible with your product. But how did you have the strength or the fortitude to stay the path?
So you're right. I mean, that is really, really difficult, and it's something we struggle on, all the time. So even now, it's like, why don't we just go the extra step and become a CRM? And one of the main reasons is there's thousands of CRMs, and it's like I've learned in business, you have to be differentiated. So if you're going to create a CRM, how are you going to become differentiated? That's one of the things I look for is like, can we be differentiated in the market? If you can't, you're in for a struggle to try and sell, because if you're not differentiated, it just is difficult to sell. The other method I use basically in strategic decision making is I look at the 100-year rule. And what the 100-year rule is, your core product if you look back 100 years, was it valuable then? And if not, then it's like, well, it could be an issue. But if your core product, will it be valuable in 100 years from now? And you look at it in that context, like, is it true? So if you look at call tracking, so call tracking is attaching marketing data to your phone call. Was it true 100 years ago? No, not really. It was, it wasn't. So call tracking isn't actually our core value in WhatConverts. So if you look forward 100 years, is call tracking going to be valuable in 100 years from now? And in my view, in 100 years or even in a few years, it's going to be a commodity. It's not really going to be that valuable. So if I take the same process and say, like, marketing, was marketing valuable 100 years ago? Yes, it was. Lots of examples. There's lots of marketing going on 100 years ago. So, okay, if you base your product on the value of marketing, that's a good thing. So in 100 years, will there still be marketing? Well, if there's products to sell, there is still going to be marketing. So we take that viewpoint and we say, okay, we're basing our core product on tracking marketing. And so even though call tracking is a great mousetrap to get people started with us, we're actually a lead tracking management and reporting platform, and it's a lead tracking platform for marketing. If you look at the CRM, coming back to the CRM, a CRM is lead tracking for salespeople. So on the customer journey, from a stranger to a visitor to a lead, there's not a lot of software that really ties it all together nicely in a lead tracking platform. And that's what WhatConverts is. So that's what helps us stay very focused. Is it good for marketing? Are we differentiated? Are we providing value to marketers?
Well, I can definitely see that in the platform. It just so happens that most of the conversions come in over the phone, from a lot of what we see. We do have some customers that get a lot of form fill tracking, and even that is easier to do with your platform because it detects that there's a form on the page. It's very intuitive. It makes it very simple to implement. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, if you go back and you look 9 years ago, there was a lot of call tracking products already out there. I mean, there's still some of those big companies, they're still there. And what made you think back then that you could create a product that could carve out enough market share to be, viable? Because a lot of times people have this trap where, you're talking to them. It's like, okay, well, what are you going to do? And you describe to them something that maybe already exists. And they're like, well, what's better about that? And it's like, well, I mean, maybe I can make it better, or maybe I can just get my share of the market, And so I think for people out there who are thinking about developing a product, and like we were already saying, it seems like there's a new CRM or project management software out there, every year, or several. It really is never too late to create a product. It seems like.
No, I mean, so there were two questions there, I think. So the first question you were asking is like, why did we decide to compete with call tracking companies? Is that what you were asking first?
Yeah, it's like there's already giant multi-million-dollar tracking companies out there. When you were talking with your co-founders, how were those conversations going? Like in terms of, hey, we have a chance to actually compete with these guys.
So the interesting thing is we were using those call tracking companies in our agency, and it wasn't inadequate to prove the value of marketing. And so when I talked about walking into that client meeting and saying like, hey, we doubled leads, we were using call tracking, and it still wasn't good enough to answer those questions. And so you got to ask yourself the question, like, when we started WhatConverts, what problem were we solving? And I think this is key to any product you create. You got to know what problem you're solving. And you got to understand, like, if I solve that problem, what's the value to solve that problem? So, because for people to pay you money, there has to be a value proposition. Like, hey, I'm going to save you this, or I'm going to allow you to do X, and there's a value to it. If there's no value to it, you're not going to be able to sell it at a decent price. So there needs to be a problem that, if solved, has value. It sounds like a simple formula. So it's easier said than done. So when you ask me the question, why did we decide to compete with call tracking companies? It wasn't that we wanted to compete with call tracking companies. It's that we wanted to solve the problem to collect all the data around marketing so that we could prove the value of our marketing. And call tracking was one part of that. Form tracking was another part of it. Reporting was another part of it. And with the call tracking companies, you could track the calls and you could go one by one and listen to the calls, but it was difficult to qualify them in those days. It was difficult to go to a meeting and report on it. And then they say, like, okay, how many of those were qualified? How many of those were existing customers? You still couldn't do that. Our platform, what we actually built was a data infrastructure that allowed us to collect all data. So call tracking was one of them, form tracking was another one of them. And the interesting thing is we built a data structure that could accommodate calls, forms, e-commerce, chat, appointments. So it seems like a small thing because most people, the majority, use call tracking. But with all those data sources, it allows us to build a structure to pull in all sorts of data and then put it on a customer journey to give you clarity and reporting that when you go to a customer and say, like, hey, we got you 10 of these great leads and this is the value. And then when they question it, it's just a click and you can see the underlying data. So the whole data structure and access to the data is kind of hidden because from a marketing point of view, it's difficult to get that across, but it's easy to sell call tracking. So it's always appeared that we're a call tracking company when at the end of the day, we're a marketing data intelligence company.
Well, it does come across when you actually start using the product that you have stuck very close to the core, because as new channels come out to convert on, it seems like your tool is ready to be integrated. And because you do have the foundational elements structured so properly with the way that you've designed your database, it is very intuitive to put it all together.
Exactly. And I think, one thing that's missing there is when we started, we went out and said, our messaging was prove the business value of your marketing. And it made sense to me because I've felt the pain as an agency. I'd worked, run an agency for 15 years up until that point. But we got no conversions. And so we then started playing around with Google Ads and different conversions. And we said, well, we've got a call tracking included in our platform. And we put out that, and call tracking converted really, really well. And so and when you go back and you look at it, a lead tracking management and reporting platform is a big decision. It's a long sales cycle. It's complicated. It's difficult to sell. It's kind of like an enterprise sales process. But call tracking is like, you want call tracking? Within 5 minutes, I can get you set up in call tracking, now. So it was a problem that people had that could be solved quickly and therefore converts quickly. So that's how we fell into the call tracking product area.
But that does seem like, in terms of separate what your product actually does and turn it into a strategy for going to market. It sounds like you're hitting on something that's incredibly important. It's you're in it, you're surrounded by it, you're the visionary. But if you can focus in on a major problem that people are looking to solve, and it's easy for you to solve it, you can probably get in front of a lot of people very quickly and make them happy and supporters.
Yeah. That's what you've said there is very astute and it's critical. So Jeremy, our co-founder, so when we started and we had call tracking and we wanted to build this platform, we thought we'd integrate with the existing call tracking companies. So to get started, I said, one thing I do want is form tracking. And I know that's counterintuitive, but I said, I want to be able to track any form on any website within 5 minutes and collect that data in a database. And so you ask the question, why? Because, and it comes down to what you're saying. You have to be able to solve the problem quickly for a lot of people. So if we required people to use our own form builder, we knew the uptake would be slow. Because if you go to a web designer and say like, hey, we can track your forms, but you need to use our form builder, you're going to get less than 5% that would even consider that. But if you can go to somebody and say like, you want call tracking? Great. We can also do form tracking, and it's included. And they say, well, what do I have to change? You don't have to change anything. We just track it automatically. That is so powerful. Just making the ease to basically, it's reducing the friction to change.
Yeah.
If you can, yeah, just give them a solution without them having to do much, that's what you're looking for.
So as you go in and you're building out this roadmap, obviously you have an electrical engineering background. I assume you're a very technical person. I know your co-founder is.
Mm-hmm.
How much did that technical understanding of how web pages and JavaScript and server-side scripting and all of that, how it was actually working, how important was that core technical knowledge in figuring out what you should be doing?
Dude, that's such a good question. That's a long answer, but
Well, the reason I ask it is because, a lot of times, and I'm thinking about some of these big call tracking companies, and the people, there's probably, 5% of the people at the company that actually understand how it works.
mm-hmm.
But you've got that 95% that are making the decisions for the product, where you're the product owner and you actually are intimately aware of how it's working. I assume because electrical engineering, there's a lot of software involved.
So my electrical engineering was heavy current, like 400,000 volts power lines and down to 3,000 volts. So it wasn't on the software side, but what you'll find with the engineering is that you're a problem solver. And even when I was in engineering, when I saw the internet for the first time, I was like, I was back in South Africa in those days, and I was like, that is incredible. The internet, I can view information from across the world on my computer screen. And my mind was just fascinated from it. So I went and bought a book on HTML, and I learned how to do HTML and create websites. And then I realized, hold on, as the websites get bigger, you need a database. So I learned how to create databases and then connect it to a web page. So I think it's just seeing the potential of the internet that started that journey for me. And then it was just like, I want to be able to do this and I can't do it. So learn how to do it. And then over time, my technical skills hit the ceiling. I didn't want to become a developer. And so I found like a student to create the code what I needed. But those building blocks of understanding where data lives and how to display data has been key. And then understanding, like how a web browser works and how information is displayed, was important. And then also with Jeremy, he worked for my agency for a good 7 years before he left and then came back, and we formed together to co-found WhatConverts. And he himself, he started out as an art student doing web design, and he's developed and learned how to code. And I think it's just, there's so much knowledge online. If you've got the will to want to learn something, there are so many YouTube tutorials. You can learn just about anything. And it's just having that desire to start somewhere. And then once you get to that step, take the next step. Don't try and do these huge leaps. Just take one step at a time. And as you take these small baby steps, in a sense, when you look back, you realize, hold on, I've climbed a mountain.
Yeah, I think I was letting you talk there because what you were saying was a very similar path that I took back in the mid to late 90s when I first learned about the internet. And I remember just wanting to be able to do things. And in order to do it, I had to figure it out. And it meant either researching online, and there might have been a handful of good resources. Even there, it was so early that there weren't even a lot of great websites you could go to learn to code some of these things. But there were great books. I could go to Borders, or I could go to Barnes & Noble, and I could buy a book, and I could find the chapter that solved the problem. And then I would go back through the whole book and literally do everything. And I was learning these incremental pieces. And what ended up happening is I built this giant spider web of information of how to solve problems. But it's that attitude that you mentioned that you had and that your co-founder Jeremy had, where it's like, hey, just because I'm starting from this point, it's that attitude and that willingness to learn and to strive and to solve problems and to acquire the skills that really was your jet fuel.
You said it very nicely, and I've got kids, and I've got kids that one's graduated college already, and I remember talking to them, and there's this whole big drive about should you go to college, shouldn't you go to college? And I'm someone I'm an electrical engineer, but when I came to the USA, my qualifications don't mean anything. And being a business owner, there's something I talk about a lot. It's just understanding value. And you know, as a person, it's like you don't have to go to college to achieve things. So I'm not against college at all. I think it's a great path to take. But if you don't go to college, I think there is so much opportunity around, and all it takes is being curious, solving problems, like just looking at something and asking yourself, can I add value? And myself, when I came to the country, getting new clients, it's kind of daunting. But all I had to do was show them, like, hey, if you give me a chance, I'm going to show you value. For what you pay me in value, I'm going to give you more value back. And just that thought process of like, how can I show value to somebody is all you need to really be successful in the world, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel wholeheartedly in that, and I try to tell it to my son and to the people around the office that, hey guy, it just has to be worth it. It just has to be worth it. Just be worth it. If we want to collect the account or whatever, keep the account, we just have to be worth it. And that's going to change by definition. The client's going to get educated. We want them to be, and we want to continue to be that group of people that's curious and that can solve those problems on into the future. And they want to keep picking us to get in the game and help solve these problems for us. I was speaking on a panel last week, and I was sitting next to a behavioral psychologist, and she was a PhD, and we were talking about the impact that artificial intelligence was making in the world. And it's making it to where answers to questions are instant, even if they're not 100% correct or whatever, but people are starting to get trained really quickly that the answers are instant. And we touched on the path of going to college or not going to college. Like, is it really necessary any longer? And I asked her, what are those things that we can do as parents or coaches or leaders within our organization to inspire creative problem solving? And she gave me an exercise, and she said, let me give you an example. She said, well, let's ask ChatGPT. But then the second thing she said was, you present a problem, and then what you do is you ask for perspectives around that problem. So in my case, she said, for example, there are rats in the basement. And that's it. That she just stopped there. She said, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And she said, are you going to exterminate them? Are you going to try to collect them and sell them? Are you going to eat them? Are you going to help them find a way out? And so she said that it's the process of coming up with those different perspectives and thinking about it. That's the muscle that you need to stretch in the brain. And that's what we need to see in our kids and our colleagues.
I love that. Yeah.
And that's the thing that we can do better than AI can do, because AI is at a very core level, it's just pattern matching, right?
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of AI, where have you seen it impact your product development path, especially this latest generative AI?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I love technology. And I don't know if it's just as you get older, you kind of wait to see what happens. I jump in and I see what's going on. So I think there's absolutely a lot of hype, around it. And I think true AI is really, really difficult, and you need a lot of data. So there's a lot of generic information out there that, through ChatGPT is coming back and giving very human answers based on, like you said, pattern matching. I really think the value of AI is, having your own data set and getting insights from it. Because I know if I look at from a point of view of a marketer, and I know there's medical examples, using AI to look at imaging. So I think when you take it to specific fields and you think, okay, how can AI, essentially a computer with lots of data, do this better than the human? Because humans are pretty good at doing a lot of different things. And I'm jumping around a bit. I've talked about marketing data, I've talked about medical imaging just briefly, and then you got like Tesla. They've been promising full self-driving for how long? And they're getting there now, but it's more difficult than you realize. So saying that, with WhatConverts, if I look at it in the context of how to do better marketing with our product, it's all the data we collect. One of the problems with our data is there's so much of it. And for a human to go look through all that data. So, for example, a normal customer's journey, he may touch 5 different marketing data sources, and he might take 3 or 4 conversion actions. And that's just one person. And now if you think, okay, now you get 2,000 leads a month, and each lead action that happens, there's 70 data points. And so when I mentioned there's 3 data points in all the marketing sources, you're talking at about, 1,000 pieces of data just for one customer journey. And then, you overlay that at 2,000, customers that are happening. It's just an overwhelming amount of data. And I think AI is great at taking that data and, like you said, pattern matching, and then giving you those insights. So I don't know if that's a great answer, but for us, the important thing and the missing part of the whole lead tracking process is the qualification, categorization, and valuation of leads. So for us, we've built in like lead intelligence rules now, and then we're also applying the AI to pick out from the leads, but not just the lead in terms of, like, a phone call has a transcript. So you got the phone call recording. So we can pick out keywords in there to determine, like, is this lead qualified? Can I attach a value to the transcript? And in addition to that, we're also looking at all the journey data as well, like what campaign did it come from? So for instance, if I take a dental example and somebody phones in and says, hey, I'm looking to get a root canal, and you think of the information you have, if they came from a Google Ads campaign and the search term was root canal, and they landed on a landing page that includes the word root canal, and then the words that they used in the transcript mention root canal, and they want to have an appointment and they're a new patient, that's all the information you need to qualify and value a lead. So that's where we're looking in AI is, how can we take all the data we have and extract the insights that would take many, many hours, even if it's possible for a human to do, to consolidate that data into insights.
Yeah, we actually have a very similar case that we work with one of our clients, and they're looking at it that way, but they are also looking at it. This is for an eye doctor. So an eye clinic, they have about 5 or 6 locations, geographically spread out over, 75 or 100 miles. And one of the things they look at, just like how you went to market with call tracking, they're also looking at how they go to market. So when they go to market for a very, value priced eye exam, they know that it's going to lead to eye surgeries and more appointments and glasses and all the other things. But they're really trying to understand the lifetime value. And, having your data has been essential for figuring out that process.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, I love those examples. That's super interesting. But I mean, it's so sometimes, I think what we recognize is with new technology comes a lot of hype. And I think we've seen that, going to NFTs, going to crypto, going back to the .com bomb thing. The difficulty is understanding what's actually doable, what's actually practical, and putting it in a context that really is going to be helpful. And to do that, there's just so much noise. So I spend a lot of time just absorbing real applications, absorbing information like, where you can write blog posts easily. I mean, that's one of that's just the explosion of content. And I haven't jumped on that bus because when I looked at the content produced from the AI, you can tell, it's pretty generic. It's not unique. So I'm asking the question, like, how can we create unique content with the help of AI? Because if you just rely on AI, you're going to end up like everybody else. And if you're not differentiated in any way, you're not going to achieve your outcome at the end of the day. So anyway, I spend a lot of time just analyzing, absorbing the information, trying to pass out the noise to figure out what's actually going to be practical and useful.
Yeah, well, we are going to definitely keep an eye on you as you continue to develop WhatConverts. What is next for WhatConverts and for Michael Cooney?
What is next? I mean, believe it or not, we've been going for 9 years, and it kind of feels like we've been building the product, for 9 years, getting to the stage where we're happy. And there's always going to be development and increasing. So we're currently at the stage where the product is great. And I think we hit that stage about 2 years ago. And then we decided we want to scale. And what we found there is that as a company, it's really difficult to scale. The complexity increases. So the last 2 years is we've continued working in the product, but we're building up processes in the company to run the company. And one of the most challenging things, and I think you'll find this yourself, is, getting the right people in the company and getting them trained up to a certain stage. That's been more of a difficult challenge recently. And so we're at a stage now where the product is good, our company processes are good, we've got great people, and now it's to scale the company more. So that's kind of where we're going from a technical point of view. It's just continuing that journey where we see a huge hole in the market for lead tracking software for marketing, and we're filling that nicely. And I just think that's going to become a much bigger market, for marketers. So we're going to continue focusing on that.
Well, as you continue to scale, one of the things that I've noticed is you're really promoting all of the integrations. In my opinion, I think that that's a great strategy, because if you are utilizing other marketplaces to build awareness about your tool, you can reach millions of people instead of thousands of people through your own marketing efforts.
Yeah, that's one of the strategies. The interesting thing about integrations is, and something like we sort of shied away from integrations that send our data out, where the value is then passed to the third party. For instance, like taking call tracking data and sending it into Salesforce is a common integration that most people do. We don't like that. We don't think it serves the marketer. It takes your valuable marketing data and puts it in the control of the sales side. So when we talk about integration, we look at it from the point of view like, yes, we do want to enable your sales team to operate effectively by sending them leads. But at the same time, if we do that, we want you to send back the qualification data from that CRM. If you are using a CRM, many of our customers don't use CRMs, but if you're using a CRM, we want to enrich WhatConverts data with the sales and qualification data with that integration.
Makes sense. Well, where can we follow your thought leadership and your next moves leading WhatConverts?
I'm wanting to do more podcasts. I'm not great on social media. So I don't know. It's just I wanted to come up, have a conversation with you guys and start having more of these conversations and see where it leads.
Well, I hope it was a good experience for you. We appreciate you
Absolutely.
coming on.
Oh, thank you so much, Cords.
You're welcome. And you can follow us anywhere where podcasts are found, across all of the Bake More Pies social media, and also on the lawofrelevancy.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.